This really happened to me, and I'm telling it the only way I know how. Clean, straight, and without dressing it up. I was 62 when the thing that broke me in half happened, and I still remember the scratch of the velvet rope and the smell of furniture polish in the Franklin House ballroom, as if it's pressed inside my lungs. The woman with the clipboard barely looked up before saying, "You're not on the guest list," and the security guard angled his shoulder to steer me away from the door. I was clutching the embossed invitation when the host, across the marble foyer, under that ridiculous baccarat chandelier, cut through the noise and said, loud enough to still the strings, "She owns the entire venue." The invitation was heavy, cotton paper, blind debossed, a weapon of etiquette, and I felt it bow as my hand trembled. Behind the velvet rope, Manhattan charity people were lined up like a train car of perfume and tiny black purses, gathered for an emergency fundraiser that someone had scheduled on my calendar without asking. It should have been a triumph, that host's sentence, but humiliation travels faster than sound. In the 2 seconds before his announcement landed, a dozen faces had already catalogued me as nobody, and the doorman's palm still hovered like a verdict over my shoulder. If you genuinely enjoy our stories, please subscribe to the channel. Tell us where you're from and what time it is right now. It's always fascinating to know how far our story flows. The guests were there for a cause, of course. There's always a cause in Tribeca, especially on a Thursday night, when the weather holds and the Hudson smells clean, and the cabs along Franklin Street blink their orange lights like patient animals. This one was for a downtown literacy nonprofit. I know, because I'd written one of the first checks when they were still handing out stapled anthologies in a church basement on Canal. The music, live, a quartet tucked under the mezzanine, sliced polite and bright through the foyer, and the bartender in our second-floor bar was already stirring martinis for board members who arrived early enough to stake out the corner banquette. The building was mine, a 19th century cast iron with a brick spine, a freight elevator that still coughed like a mule, and plaster medallions we restored by hand. My children, grown and stretched across 3 time zones, call it Mom's stubborn heart. I bought Franklin House the year after my husband died. Everyone told me not to, especially the men whose hands went warm and heavy on my shoulder as if I were a horse about to spook. Market's frothy, they said. Cap rates this, cash flow that. What I heard was the stubborn beat of a promise I'd made to myself over coffee at the Greek diner on Church and Reed. That grief wouldn't flatten me into a widow-shaped shadow. I'd worked events for 3 decades, hotels, museums, the rooms people pretend are neutral while they barter favors and forge empires. I knew how a space holds power like a battery. Owning the venue, owning the calendar, meant not asking permission. There's an older woman invisibility that's equal parts curse and shield. In the beginning, it helped me. Walking the site with contractors at 6 a.m., a baseball cap low over my eyes, a small clipboard full of invoices and codes. They'd curse at the corroded pipes, and I'd say, "We'll pull new copper. I'll run the numbers." And they'd glance at each other like they were about to explain something simple, then stop, and we'd work instead. I painted until my wrists sang pain. I laid down herringbone floors with a crew of Dominican men who taught me to listen for the click. I learned where the afternoon light dies on the north wall of the main hall and leaves a soft stage for speeches. I learned how to listen to the building's ghosts, which really just meant listening to my own. When we opened, the New York Magazine listing used the words unexpectedly elegant, which made me laugh until I cried. I didn't invite a lot of partners into Franklin House. The two I did, well, the two that matter in this story, slipped past me with the patience of water. The first, Lydia Vale, was precisely the kind of woman Tribeca produces like expensive fruit late in the season. Early 40s, a mother with a Pilates spine, sharp blonde bob, bracelets that whispered when she gestured. She'd run charitable galas for a decade and was getting bored with the hotel ballrooms uptown. "You've built a rare thing," she told me, the first time we walked through my main hall together. She slid her fingers along the chair rail like a pianist. "It feels like history that's willing to listen." It was the exact phrase I'd used to myself, alone, kneeling with a rag and vinegar when nobody wanted to rent the place yet. So yes, I liked her. I let her put 3 events on the calendar at a reduced rate because she swore the right people would come. They did. They posted our chandeliers and mentioned the venue in captions. By Christmas, the bookings ran 6 months out. The second was a man named Evan Pike, and I should have known he'd be trouble the moment he smirked at my HVAC contractor. Evan had the salesman walk, loose shoulders, shoes that were bought by phone call, hands he kept visible as a way of proving innocence he hadn't been asked to prove yet. He pitched the kind of partnership that's a knife disguised as a handshake. A liquidity bridge, he called it, that would ease cash flow and let me bundle winter revenue into a spring expansion. It was clever enough to be tempting, and the documents looked serious, heavy with paragraphs and grace periods. But the net of it was simple. He wanted an option to buy into the operations side, to add his relationships and fill rate data in exchange for a percentage of bar sales, and some say, over-programming. Just an option, he said, as if I were a child picking a flavor. No obligation. When I hesitated, Lydia put a fingertip on my sleeve and whispered, "He can bring the hedge fund people who want to drink where their names never appear." At 62, I don't flutter easily, but I made a mistake a lot of women my age make. I mistook a man's roaring certainty for competence and a woman's soft confidence for loyalty. I signed. It wasn't total control. No one but me touched the deed. But it gave Evan an opening in the operations I would spend the next year trying to seal. He installed a POS system he preferred and hired a friend to consult on bookings. He moved through the building like a man arranging his own furniture, and when staff came to me about his tone, I stepped into a hallway with him and lowered my voice and said, "Do not speak to my bartenders like they're your interns." He smiled without his eyes and said, "You and I are aligned, Miriam. We just see different routes to the same view." The first real tremor in the floorboards appeared in the form of a white envelope that should have been a dull insurance bill. I was at my desk above the mezzanine, the window open to Franklin Street, sirens and bicycle bells, making the city feel like a living lung. The envelope listed additional insureds that had grown since last quarter, like mushrooms after rain. 3 new entities had been appended to the policy. One was Lydia's company, which made sense. The other 2 were LLCs I didn't recognize: White King Events and North Wall Holdings. When I asked my broker, he said, "They're listed on the certificate request you signed last month." Only I hadn't signed anything of the sort. I looked at the PDF he sent. There was my signature. A pretty good forgery, to be honest. But the right slant on my capital M gave it away. Some people put dots above their eyes like rain splatter. Mine are careful, almost square. The one on the certificate looked like a drip. I walked downstairs and found Lydia arranging escort cards with a volunteer for a gala 2 nights from then. She looked up with a smile that flared and then cooled when she saw my face. "Can we talk?" I asked, keeping my voice light. She nodded me into the side office, my office, where the floor still smelled like fresh varnish, because I'd had to replace boards after a caterer's dolly scraped an ugly scar across them. I closed the door and held up my phone with the PDF on the screen. "What is White King?" I asked. She blinked, and for a fraction of a second, her eyes did the math of what I knew and what she could still pretend I didn't. "Evans Company," she said. "Just administrative. For certificates." "And Northwall?" She paused a beat too long. "An umbrella. You know how these things are." My stomach dropped with a sensation I remember from the night my doctor called with test results years earlier. Not cancer, thank God. But the moment before the relief when you stand on the thin rim of a worse world. "My signature is forged," I said softly. She reached across the desk as if she could push the air between us back into shape. "Miriam, it was last minute." She did that thing women like us are trained to do, to make a mess look like a grace. The client needed proof of coverage. You were in a meeting. Your assistant said it was fine. And listen, I shouldn't have. Evans said. Evans said, I repeated. And in my mouth, the name tasted like when you bite your cheek hard enough to bleed. That night, I pulled the bank statements spread across my dining table at home. My apartment is on Leonard, a rent-stabilized holdover from a marriage that started with excitement and ended quiet like weather. I made tea that went cold. I opened the POS reports and the deposit receipts and matched them with a pencil the old-fashioned way. The numbers should have balanced within the accepted wobble of cash bars and vendor timing. They didn't. It wasn't huge. Never huge. And that's the brilliance of theft, when it's done by someone who understands the way attention works. It was a skim, a ghost percentage that seemed to drift away toward shore in calm, imperceptible tide. A transaction fee here, an equipment rental there that looked like it rode piggyback on a real charge. Northwall Holdings appeared 3 times, tiny, like an annotation. By midnight, I knew I was being stolen from. By 2, I suspected how. The next morning, I went early to the little cafe on West Broadway, where the owner insists on pulling every espresso himself. I brought a legal pad and wrote, "Things that are mine, things that are not." Endings are like that for me. Lists, rules, grids, old-school rails that keep the train on course. Then I began to pull thread. I called the broker again and asked for every certificate request for the last 6 months. I called my assistant and asked if she had ever authorized signatures. She hadn't. I called my son in Oakland and lied and said I was fine when he asked why my voice sounded like I'd been breathing thin air. I walked to the Department of Buildings office on Broadway and pulled the public file on Franklin House to make sure no one had filed anything that touched the certificate of occupancy. I stopped in at a small law firm on Nassau. I'd found, through a widows group, because they'd helped another woman sort out the mess of a husband's hidden debts. The partner there, a woman my age with hair like gray feathers, listened to my list and said, "Start with the boring. The boring is where they get you." When the night of the literacy fundraiser arrived, the night of the velvet rope and the humiliating hand, it wasn't supposed to be my night. I'd planned to slip in late and observe from the balcony, like a queen pretending to be a ghost. But by 6, I had 3 new facts written in the gender-neutral block, letters my father taught me. Evan's option agreement contained a clause that let him designate programming partners who could, with my implied consent, make operational decisions for events they underwrote. The POS system he'd installed quietly funneled a platform fee to a processor routed to, you guessed it, North Wall. And Lydia, whose company had begun charging coordination fees directly to my clients, had used my vendor mailing list, exported under test on a Tuesday afternoon, to solicit business for events not at Franklin House, with discounts if those clients allowed her to bundle bar packages through his platform. It was small stuff. It was also the kind of small stuff that, multiplied by months and clients, and my ignoring it for the sake of harmony, becomes a pipeline you don't even know is draining you until your bones go hollow. I dressed like a woman who owns the place. Black silk suit with a collar that sits like a small crown. The pearl studs my husband bought at a street fair in New Orleans because he said they looked like bubbles. Flat shoes, because I'd learned that power increases with the surface area of your soul. I tucked the offending insurance certificate into my clutch, printed in duplicate. The car dropped me on Franklin, and the building looked beautiful. The way a child does when you catch them doing something good, and for a second, you forget the fight you're in. The foyer glowed. The flowers were tall and white. The quartet's bows caught the light like grown-up wands. And then the clipboard and the palm and the sentence that felt like a slap that accidentally wakes you from a nightmare. "You're not on the guest list. I didn't make a scene. One thing age gives you is the ability to let silence do the speaking." I stood. The guard's body softened just slightly, as if maybe he knew some version of the line he'd just crossed. The woman with the clipboard straightened, prepared to escalate. And then the host, an iron-haired man who'd been the face of this non-profit since it was 6 folding chairs in a borrowed room, saw me, put his hand in the air, and came, voice solid and loud as a bell. "She owns the entire venue." It was gratifying in the way that cool water on a burn is gratifying, but you still need a doctor after. My doctor that night was the kitchen. I peeled off the gathering, dipped through the service hallway where we keep the rolling racks of glassware, and walked into my office. I could feel the building around me, the way a guitarist feels the sound through the wood. I shut the door. I sat. I breathed. Then I opened my laptop and logged into the POS with the admin credentials I never gave up. The platform fee had a dashboard. The dashboard had a partners tab. The partners list had 5 names. 3 were legit. 2 weren't. I clicked North Wall. The email attached to the account was a Gmail address that contained Evan's initials and the year he graduated from whatever business school he liked to mention in elevators. I clicked Forgot Password, and the system, bless it, offered to text a reset code to the number on file. I didn't have that phone, but I did have something else. the log of IP addresses used to access the account for the past 30 days. It was a hidden feature, built for security. It listed a co-working space on Lafayette I knew Evan favored, and to my surprise, it listed an office Wi-Fi network I recognized because I'd helped set it up. Lydia's. Heat spread low in my ribs. Not rage yet, not revenge, not even grief. It was resolve reawakening an old skill. I made 4 screenshots. I emailed them to myself at 2 addresses and to the lawyer with feather hair with the subject line, North Wall Access Points. Then I opened the camera on my phone, photographed the forged certificate, and texted it to Lydia with 4 words. Come to my office. I didn't send it to Evan. He was the kind of man who could turn absence into advantage. I wanted him guessing. 2 minutes later, the door opened. Lydia stepped in and closed it behind her with a soft hand, as if she could still make this a private matter. The quartet's music seeped in through the wall like a polite ghost. This is not a conversation for tonight, she said softly. This is a celebration. This is a theft, I said, just as softly. And this is my building. She swallowed. For the first time since I'd met her, I saw something inside her falter. Not guilt, not yet, but the fear that she'd backed the wrong horse. Evan said, "Stop telling me what Evan said," I snapped. And the old woman in me, the widow who had outlived being dismissed, stood up inside my skin in a way that frightened us both. "Start telling me what you did." Her lips pressed together like she was holding a secret between them, and it had teeth. The quartet slid into a gentle Gershwin. Down the hall, someone laughed the high laugh of a person who believes their night will end in a photograph they want to keep. Lydia's bracelets didn't whisper this time. They clinked with a tiny metallic sound. She sat. "I didn't think you'd notice," she said. And then, as if remembering herself, she added quickly, "Not like that. I mean, Miriam, the platform fee is industry standard. It's pennies. We used it to cover the extra staff Evan's people brought in. We smoothed the experience. These clients expect a certain—" "Who got the pennies?" I asked. She looked at the floor. "North Wall." "Which is Evan." She didn't deny it. She looked up, and the pity in her eyes took me by surprise. "You didn't want partners, Miriam, but you wanted the room to be full. You wanted the respect that comes from being hard to get. Evan knows how to make that happen. This is how it's done now. We bundle, we curate, we keep the friction off the client's end, and we let the machine scrape its bit. You still come out ahead." "I come out hollow," I said, "and that is not a business I run." Something changed in her face, something cold. She reached for a tone she hadn't used with me before, the one Arsenal moms use on refs. "Be careful," she said. "This nonprofit is in there right now because I put them there. The people on that stage are my people. I don't want to make them choose." I stood. Years ago, a banquet manager at the Four Seasons taught me a trick. If you're going to stand, do it slow. Give the other person time to grasp the fact they will have to tilt their head to keep looking you in the eye. "I already made a choice," I said. "I chose to own this place, and I choose to end the skimming tonight. Now tell me, is there anything else I haven't found yet?" She hesitated, and then she told me something that made the floor shift under my feet a second time. Evan had scheduled a compliance audit for the following Tuesday. It wasn't city, it was private, under the auspices of a preferred vendor program he'd sold me in a glossy deck. If that audit found deficiencies, We'd be temporarily suspended from certain high-dollar client lists, the hedge funds and boutiques he promised. The fix? We could outsource more of our operations to his partner network to meet compliance faster. Temporary, she said, just to get through spring. My laugh cut the room in half. So I'd have to hand him my calendar, I said, and the keys to my staff. And when I'm finally compliant again, he'll have my clients, and Franklin House will be a brand with its pulse somewhere else. Lydia didn't deny it because denial would have required conscience, and conscience is the one thing that never seemed to fit right on her. You can still be the face, she said. I opened the office door and gestured to the hallway. Get out, I said, and when this event ends, you'll leave your keys with security. She stood. The pity was gone. The social math was back. She tilted her head like a person examining a painting that disappointed her. You're going to burn your own house down, she said. For pride. Maybe, I said. But if I do, I'll be the one who lights the match and sweeps the ashes. Not Evan, not you. She looked at me for a long second, then walked out. I closed the door and locked it, and when my hands shook, I pressed my palms flat against the desk until they learned steadiness again. Then I pulled a yellow legal pad and wrote 2 columns. What I can prove tonight and what I will prove next. Under tonight, I wrote forged certificate, platform fee routing, IP logs, client list export. Under next, I wrote audit contracts, POS processor agreement, Employment Law Council, AG's Charities Bureau hotline. I took a breath and felt something I hadn't felt in a long time. Not youth, not exactly, but the exact sister of youth. Strategy. When I stepped back into the hall, I heard a new sound underneath the polite music and the charity chatter of donors. The sound of a room shifting allegiances. If you work events long enough, you learn to hear it. It's the breath a crowd takes before it decides which way the night will tilt. I had always trusted rooms to intensify whatever you feed them. It was time to feed mine, the truth. I walked toward the foyer, the forged certificate warm in my hand like a live thing. The host was at the microphone, introducing a former student who would read a paragraph from the first story he'd ever written. Lydia stood off stage, eyes on me, fingers still. Evan, I realized with a jolt, wasn't there yet. His text, hours earlier, had been a breezy, running 10 minutes late, start without me. It would be my last gift from him, absence. I stepped up to the host and asked for 30 seconds after the reading. He blinked, confused, loyal to Lydia, more loyal to his cause than to any single person. But he saw whatever was in my face and nodded. The boy read. The room sighed and cheered. The host handed me the microphone, and the velvet rope memory burned soft at the edge of my skin like a bruise, almost gone. Good evening, I said, and my voice slid down the columns and into the floor and up into the chandeliers in that weird way sound does when it belongs to a room. Some of you know me, some of you don't. My name is Miriam, and I own Franklin House. I am honored to have you here, and I am also, I held up the certificate, obliged to tell you that there has been a mistake tonight that I intend to correct. I watched 3 things happen at once. Lydia's face shuttered, the host's jaw set, and in the back, near the doors, the security guard who'd raised his palm earlier lifted his chin, eyes flicking to the woman with the clipboard. In the space where people normally twirl their wine stems and glance down at programs, silence pooled instead. Someone forged my signature, I said, calm as a judge. Someone routed a fee from your drinks into an account that does not belong to Franklin House. Someone used my building and my staff in a way that violates the simplest rule we run by. We tell you what you're paying for. We deliver exactly that. Nothing more, nothing less. A murmur rose, uncertain, then settled again, as if the room wanted me to finish. I didn't name names. Not yet. I didn't need to. I said the audit would happen on Tuesday, and that, until then, any event that flowed through Franklin House would operate under my direct oversight, at cost, with bar receipts posted publicly to the nonprofit at the end of the night. I said the word publicly like a match head. And then, because I am not a woman who pleads, I thanked them for their patience, for their generosity to a cause I still love, and for giving me 30 seconds of their belief. I handed the microphone back and felt my body begin to tremble in that private way a body does after it has acted like a sword. Lydia was there by the wing before I could slip off stage. Her smile was the kind of smile people use at gravesides. "You just made enemies," she whispered. "Not yet," I said. "That's next." And I meant it. Because while the room breathed and the quartet found its way back to the safe ground of standards, I was already hearing the clatter of a different hallway, the one at 60 Center Street, New York County Supreme Court, where marble and fluorescent lights make even lies look beige. I could see, in that second, the file folders, the stamped copies, the clean geometry of a TRO. I could see Evan's face, still amused, then increasingly less so, as he discovered what it's like to have a woman old enough to be his mother pull on every lever in the building he thought he'd quietly wired to his own name. That would be the war. But the moment I stepped off that stage and into the corridor I'd sanded and varnished with my own hands, my phone vibrated twice and showed a text message that chilled me with its timing and its audacity. From a blocked number, a photo of my daughter stepping out of a cafe in Los Angeles, time-stamped that afternoon, paired with 4 words that made my blood run cold. Audit or family first. For a single, nauseating heartbeat, I felt 12 again. Because that's when I learned that threats arrive on ordinary afternoons and wear ordinary shoes. I stared at my phone, at the thumbnail of my daughter walking under the terracotta awning on Fairfax like she'd been caught by a security camera, and texted as a joke. The timestamp told me it wasn't a stock photo dug up to scare me. The late California light turned her hair the color of wheat. Audit or family first? The quartet blurred into a sawed line. I stepped into the stairwell, where the sound of the building is truest. The thrum of ducks, the rise and fall of stair traffic, a spoon somewhere clinking glass. I hit call. She answered on the first ring, because my children have learned that I don't call during their workday unless something is wrong. "Sweetheart, where are you right this second?" I said, not saying hello, not saying mom. "We're going to breathe," because I needed facts to hold on to like the rail. "In the lift, why?" I just left Alfred. "Are you okay? You sound—" "I'm fine. Listen to me. I got a creepy text, probably nothing. But when you get home, I want you to go straight upstairs, lock your door, and send me a video of your front hall with the deadbolt in view. Then call Mateo to stay with you. I'm going to text Officer Lang the clip." Officer Lang wasn't a cop. She was my neighbor's sister and used to work in LAPD's community relations before she had a baby and moved to Culver City. She knows the desk sergeant at West Hollywood, and once shepherded my daughter through a break-in report when a bike got stolen from their garage. Not a badge, but a compass. My daughter's breath snagged. "Do you want me to go to the station now?" "No, home first. Don't change your route. Text me when you're in the elevator. Don't worry your brother. I've got him in another time zone. We're okay. We're more than okay." I softened my voice. This is just a stupid man trying to feel big. He doesn't know who he walked into. I felt, while I was saying it, the truth harden around the words like plaster around wire. She promised. She told me she loved me the way grown children do when they're angry that something can still frighten them at 30. I promised back and hung up. Then I took the stairs 2 at a time down to security. Xavier, the evening lead, looked up from the bank of monitors. He's a former Army medic, quiet, eyes that see the edges first. "I'm elevating," I said. "We may have somebody playing with family photos in L.A. I don't know how close they are in New York. Assign Mara to shadow the donation box and keep cameras recording to cloud and local. Anyone asks for footage, tell them your policy is to hold until the owner releases." That's me. You'll see Lydia try to override you. She's out of scope. At the end of the night, gather her key fob. I slid my phone across to show him the text. He didn't flinch. "Do you want a car to sit on your building?" he asked, meaning my apartment. "No," I said, "but call Roman and have him walk staff to the corner in pairs. And—" I hesitated, because pride carries strange cargo. "Walk me back to the floor, just until I'm through that room." He grinned. "Yes, ma'am." The host caught my eye from the dais. He is a man of the old school who knows when to keep a program moving. Lydia's face had smoothed into that diplomatic cool. Women in our industry are born with or learn by necessity. It was a relief that Evan was still absent. There's a mercy in having a shadow to fight instead of a face, at least for a night. The fundraiser finished without a spill. I posted the bar receipts, as promised, at 11:30 p.m., printing 2 copies with the thermal printer curling edges like old photographs and handing 1 packet to the nonprofit treasurer. He shook my hand with a look that said he'd been to other venues and knew the difference between a place that treats a charity like a ticket to a list and a place that understands money is just ink without trust. When most guests had gone and the bar smelled like citrus and wet ice, Lydia came to the office door again. She held her keys in her palm, the way people hold rosary beads when they're not sure if they're praying. She placed the fob on my desk without meeting my eyes. "This is a mistake," she said. "Not for you. For the kids, these events help." "Kids can be helped without your skim," I said, gently, because I am still, against my will, the kind of woman who makes room for others to save face. "Send me your invoices through month end. Everything legit gets paid. Everything that isn't, we'll litigate. And that audit on Tuesday? It doesn't happen here." Her head snapped up. "You can't stop it. Watch me." When she was gone, I closed the door and called the lawyer with gray feathered hair. "TRO," I said. "Ex parte. I've got forgery, platform routing, IP logs, misuse of charitable proceeds, and I've got a man who thinks the word audit is a wand." She didn't waste time with sympathies. "Meet me at 60 Center Street at 9. Bring copies and a thumb drive. We'll draw the right judge if we're lucky. Even if we draw the wrong one, we'll get a temporary that buys you a week." We filed the petition under emergency, and if justice is blind, urgency teaches it Braille. The clerk moved us up with a look at the forged certificate. He'd seen enough charities bled by people who liked to stand on stage to recognize my flavor of fury. We argued in a courtroom that smelled like every courtroom, the faint wax of benches, the cold light that makes everyone look like they need a sandwich. My lawyer laid it out. Fraudulent designation of additional insureds, unauthorized routing of fees, misrepresentation to charities regarding cost structure, interference with business relations by scheduling a compliance audit under a private vendor network that wasn't authorized by the owner of the premises. The judge was a woman whose robe looked like it had been tailored to let her move fast. She read. She asked 3 questions that told me she'd lived through someone trying to make fine print do what common sense shouldn't allow. We got our TRO, no audit on Tuesday, no third-party access to our POS, no routing of fees to any entity not expressly approved by Franklin House, preservation of all records, and this one my lawyer slipped in with a steady voice. An order to the platform processor to freeze any funds connected to the North Wall account pending further hearing. Serve them, the judge said. And Ms. Winfield, she added, using my last name with that slight emphasis judges use when they have a soft spot. Run your house. Mr. Pike is welcome to make his arguments on the return date. Until then, this court hates surprises. On my way down the courthouse steps into October light, so clear it rang, my phone buzzed. A video. My daughter, laughing a little as she panned her door, her deadbolt, her empty hall. "You raised me to triple check, Mom," she said. "Mateo's here. The cat is a deterrent." In the background, I heard the soft mewl of a creature who weighs 7 pounds and believes she's a mountain lion. I sent back a heart. Then I texted Officer Lang, who wrote, "Already pushed to a patrol car in the neighborhood. Ping if anything else." I sent her a second heart because sometimes a woman just wants another woman to walk down the hallway with a flashlight, even across state lines. Tuesday arrived like a held breath released. I didn't cancel the audit. The TRO did that cleanly. Instead, I rescheduled the meeting in our event conference room and invited, with proper formality, the following: the platform processor's compliance manager, who had been unaware they were a character in my story, a representative from the New York State Attorney General's Charities Bureau, who had listened to my lawyer's voicemail and said, in the tone of someone who keeps a file never far from her desk, "We've had this name before," and a process server named Gus, who has the kind of hands that could open jars forever. I also invited Evan by email to discuss recent concerns related to Franklin House operations and to accept service. I CC'd Lydia and the nonprofit host, because pettiness is a pleasure I try not to indulge. But transparency is a force multiplier, and sometimes they look alike. At 10:02 a.m., he came in like he owned the elevator. That's how you can spot men who are used to doors gliding open when they approach. They pause a fraction before the threshold, shoulders angling for the camera. He wore a navy suit that would read as self-effacing on television, and a watch that screamed if you understood the language. He smiled when he saw me, tongue touching his top teeth like a wolf tasting the wind. "Miriam," he said, stretching out my name like it was a small dog he intended to pat. "I'm offended you think we needed courts to handle a housekeeping matter." "You'll get to say that to the judge in 8 days," I said. "Today you're going to take a seat and keep your hands flat on the table whenever you're not holding a pen." He looked past me into the conference room and paused when he saw who else was there. The compliance manager had the bland face of someone who does jigsaw puzzles to quiet her mind and had found a piece beneath the couch. The charity's bureau attorney was a man in his late 50s, with gentleness around his eyes that made him trustworthy and dangerous. Gus, the process server, smiled like a bartender. "I won't sit with a state lawyer," Evan said lightly. "Confidential matters." "Not confidential," the charity's bureau attorney said. "You're welcome to leave." "I think I'll stay," Evan said, and now his smile showed the blade. He sat and placed his phone face down with the deliberateness of someone who doesn't like to be read. I noted, because my days are made of noting, that he placed it just out of reach of my hand. A small arrogance, a small safety. We began. I slid photos across the table, the forged certificate, enlarged to show the wrong dot of my eye. The North Wall partner screen with his email, the IP logs with the co-working Wi-Fi, and Lydia's office highlighted, the POS statement with the steady scrape of platform fees. He shrugged. "Standard practice," he said. "You'll find that not every major venue, routes tips and platform fees through an entity not disclosed to the charity." The compliance manager said, voice mild as oatmeal, but with a steely spoon. "We're pulling your accounts into review, effective today." He ignored her. "The audit will show—" "There is no audit," I said. I slid the TRO across. "There is a temporary restraining order. You have been enjoined from accessing our systems, scheduling audits, or routing funds. Today, you will sign the administrator release that severs North Wall from our processor entirely. If you do not, we will get an order compelling you to, and in the meantime, the processor will freeze every penny that touches your name." He leaned back, hands loose, the amused look back, the one that hadn't yet learned loss. "You don't have the leverage you think you do," he said. "If you talk like this in front of the wrong donors, you'll jade the room. People don't like mess. They'll go back to the Park Avenue hotels, where they make messes look like mirrors. The Whisper network is delicate. I can make one phone call and—" "You can make as many phone calls as you like," the charity's bureau attorney interrupted in the tone of a school principal, reminding a boy that inside voice applies to authority too. "But if those calls sound like threats to steer charitable revenue away from a venue because the owner objected to undisclosed fees, our office will be very interested in your donor list. We've been interested before." For the first time, something flickered, like a light stuttering when the power dips. He looked at me, at the compliance manager, at the state attorney, and recalculated. "Fine," he said. "We'll agree to—" Gus coughed. "Sir," he said politely, and set 2 folded papers in front of Evan. "You've just been served." He set a third in front of me, because form matters, and a fourth in front of the compliance manager and the charity's bureau attorney as courtesy copies. It was theatrical and petty and perfect. Evan didn't look at the papers. He looked at my face, hunting for the tremble. He found none. It was in my bones, in my childhood, in the nights I'd sat up with a dying husband and paid the bills and told myself I'd feel again later. The tremble had already done its job. Now there was only action. He signed the release that severed North Wall. He did not do it gracefully. He did it with the kind of flourish men use on checks, as if to make the signature feel more expensive. When he stood, he leaned in. "You just made yourself small," he murmured, the way somebody might whisper a compliment on a dance floor. I didn't lean back. "No," I said. "I made the room big enough that your tricks can't hide in it." He had a plan B. Of course he did. Plan Bs are the thing men like him collect when they collect watches. It arrived that afternoon in the form of a complaint posted on a gossip site for event planners. Anonymous tip alleging Franklin House couldn't meet compliance and sacrificed client experience for personal vendetta. The whisper network I'd lived in for 30 years hissed. My booking manager, a woman with a voice like a cello, brought me her phone, eyes worried. "Let it breathe," I said. And then I did something that would have felt like sin 2 decades ago. I went public. I posted a letter on our website and Instagram. Not furious, not defensive, just factual. A scam with platform fees, a commitment to transparency, a promise to post bar reports for any charity event for the next quarter within 24 hours. I included a link to the AG's complaint portal for charities. If you've been scammed anywhere, report it. Here's how. And I tagged Lydia's company and 3 others I knew had been whispered to, forcing them to choose between silence and alignment. When you run rooms, you learn that silence is a vote. Over the next 48 hours, votes came in. The Tribeca citizen called and asked for comment. I gave them 1 sentence, same as I gave the New York Post when they bit. Franklin House does not outsource honesty. The host from Thursday sent a note with 6 donor names who wanted to book their private events with us, not in spite of the mess, but because of the way we handled it. The compliance manager emailed to say that the processor had terminated North Wall for cause across the platform. And the charity's bureau attorney sent a short message that I printed and pinned to my corkboard. "Thank you for turning on the lights." Lydia tried to salvage. She called to say she wanted to apologize for the optics, a phrase that tells you everything about a person's weather. I told her I accepted her apology for something she hadn't said, and that I would not be referring her to any more clients. She made a soft noise that I recognized as her version of a growl. A week later, an assistant I know at a downtown PR firm told me, over a salad at Bubby's, that Lydia had lost 2 boards and 6 clients in 3 days because they couldn't risk the smell of this. "She'll land," the assistant said, with that mix of admiration and contempt we keep for survivors. Just not where she thought. Evan made a last play at the return hearing. He came with a new lawyer, a woman who wore her hair tight and her smile looser. They argued that the platform fees were industry standard and that any misunderstanding was de minimis. The judge listened, patient. Then my lawyer made her case, again presenting a neat book in blue binder tape. Recipient nonprofits and their invoices, screenshots, bank flags, the freeze response from the platform, a letter from the AG's office noting an active investigation into undisclosed routing of charitable funds through Northwall, and an associated entity we hadn't even known about yet, a Delaware registration with a misspelling so arrogant it made me laugh. Northwall Holdings. The judge extended the TRO into a preliminary injunction and set a schedule that would keep Evan's hands off my calendar for months. Outside the courthouse, the sky went that silver white that makes the Woolworth building look like it's been carved from bone. Evan passed me on the steps, pausing just long enough to say, under his breath, You only win if you think this matters. I let his words fall between the stone and our shoes. It matters to the kid who wrote the first paragraph he ever believed in under our mezzanine, I said. It matters to my bartenders getting W-2s that match their tips. It matters to my daughter, who will not grow up believing that protection is a favor men grant women when they're in a generous mood. And it matters to me, because I built something. That is the whole thing. I built something. He looked like he wanted to laugh. He didn't. He walked away and tried to cover his retreat with a phone call, so the picture would look busier. The world did not end with sirens or handcuffs. The AG's office keeps its own time, and the civil world is a long hallway with many doors you push open with paper. But the room changed. The rooms always change when you tell the truth in them. The fundraiser host called and asked for a tour, not because he hadn't seen every corner, but because he wanted to be in the space without the music, to bless it again with quiet. We walked along the rail on the mezzanine. We looked down at the floor where donors had used their money like a flashlight. He said, "I'm sorry about that night, the clipboard," and I said, "I'm grateful for the way you spoke when you did." He put his hand on the rail and said, You actually know what these rooms are made for." And I said, "Yes." My daughter visited 2 weeks later. She stood in the foyer and ran her hand along the velvet rope stanchion, like she was petting a dog that once barked at her and now is old and embarrassed about it. We ate at the Odeon because we always have, because families need rituals that taste like fries and old movie posters. We talked about men and work, and the part of me that won't retire. The part that will always find a scuff on a floor with the toe of a shoe and feel satisfaction in the fix. She said, "I don't like that Uncle tone he used," meaning Evan, and I said, "Me either, but I like the way we don't need to listen to it." At night, after the last staff text lands and the dishwashers buzz, scrolls down to a low purr, and the neighborhood starts its slow exhale, I walk the main hall in my socks because I've learned how wood speaks better to cotton than to leather. The chandeliers make their small glass noises. The chairs stand in tidy arcs like saints in a procession waiting for a cue. I think about my husband, the part of grief that is gratitude, the part that is raw and never scabs. I think about how he would have walked to the bar, put his hand under the lip to feel the joinery, and made a joke about buying the place 3 times if you count all the extra beams. I think about the first time I let myself believe I was a person whose name belonged on a deed. The last thing I did before I slept the night after the hearing was open the POS dashboard. I know, romance is wasted on the old if you believe the young. But the platform fee column read zeros, a row of clean teeth. I took a screenshot and sent it to my staff group with the caption, "We did that." The little bubbles of their replies popped like fireflies. Mara wrote, "Drinks taste better without skim." Roman wrote 3 flexed bicep emojis. I still can't interpret if they're irony or sincerity. Xavier wrote, "Doors locked. House is ours." And my booking manager wrote, "We've got 3 wedding inquiries that start with, 'Saw your letter.'" I turned off the lamp. Sometimes I pass the woman with the clipboard on the sidewalk. I don't punish her. She was doing Lydia's script and scary men's math. If she looks down, I smile a little bigger. If she says hello, I say it back with the bright politeness old women master, because we know kindness is just strategy with better posture. It's not because I'm magnanimous. It's because I live with the building like a living thing now, and living things need oxygen more than victory. Every once in a while, a courier brings a thick envelope to my desk with the state seal on it. Updates, investigations weave. I don't spend my days hungry for them. I read them like weather reports, probability of rain, wind out of the east, this front moving, that one stalled. If a storm breaks over Evan's head, if he has to settle or pay or disappear to Miami, to reinvent himself as something involving wellness on a yacht, it will not give me back 1 hour of the 3 a.m.s I lost. But there is a modest, precise satisfaction in knowing that a man like that cannot put his hands into the machine and come away with a little coin roll without anyone noticing any more. Not here, not now, not in my house. Once a month, I host a free writing night in the mezzanine because I meant it when I said the building is a battery. Teenagers come with their spiral notebooks. A woman in her 70s comes with a leather journal and writes in a hand as neat as type. The nonprofit printed new anthologies that smell like glue and hope. We sit and write for 10 minutes at a time. Sometimes I sit with them and make a list, because lists are my religion and my therapy. Last week, the list I made was titled, Things a Room Teaches You. It had 3 items: that a crowd can be swayed by breath alone, that a door is a promise you keep by choosing who walks through it, that someone will always try to write their name where yours belongs. When I looked up, the girl across from me, piercing hoodie, eyes like those stormy days when the East River forgets what color it wants to be, said, "Do you ever get scared?" I thought about the text with my daughter's photo. I thought about the ropes scratch and the palms hover, and the moment the host's voice cut the air open like a knife. I thought about how humiliation is an engine you can drive forward or backward, how it smells like ozone right before lightning, and how I had decided to point mine toward daylight. All the time, I said, but I have keys. Sometimes, when a new planner shows up for a walkthrough, they ask, half joking, because their bosses taught them to respect the ways older women turn jokes into knives. Are we on the guest list? I let the pause hang. I let them feel the weight of the velvet rope that isn't there. I look past them at the room I built plank by plank, through grief and paint and theft and law, and I say, if you're honest, you don't need to be on a list. The door is open. Walk in. And at night, when I lock the doors, I reach up and tug the velvet rope across the empty foyer. The rope slides with that soft, familiar scratch, like gloved fingers across silk. It used to sound like a barrier. Now it sounds like a boundary I drew myself. It sounds like a sentence being written correctly at last. A name inked in the right square, a signature that matches the eye dots I've made since I learned to write my name. Square, careful, mine. I still think about how fast humiliation moves, faster than sound, faster than light if it can. But I learned something in the echo that followed. Ownership moves too. Ownership takes the speed of your resolve and adds the weight of your deeds, and suddenly it's heavier than a man's smirk, heavier than a forged signature, heavier than any whisper dressed as a storm. The room holds it. The room feeds it back. And when someone at a doorway, any doorway, squares their shoulders and says, "You're not on the guest list," I don't wait for rescue. I don't need the host. I don't need the chandelier to listen. I lift the rope. I show my keys, and if they ask who I am, I tell them the truth in a sentence that doesn't need to be loud, because it's already written in the walls. I own the entire venue. The end.